Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mountain Buck Monday, the series of East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Spartan Forge. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my own Mountain Buck Monday story instead of giving a listener one on today's episode. So going to go through and break down everything about how I found the area to that ended up resulting, I guess, in taking my biggest buck to date with a bow. Not my biggest buck in general. The one last year was a little bit bigger, but he was definitely my biggest one with a bow. So I want to talk about that entire experience here. But first, thanks to Spartan Forge for being the title sponsor of the podcast. The Spartan Forge app utilizes years of military background and machine learning to pull from millions of data points to accurately predict deer movement. And the new app also includes GPS mapping with incredible aerial imagery, offline dependability, deer prediction, weather updates, journal entries, and much more. The beta app is released now, so some of you, if you jumped in early, are able to use the app right now. And the purpose of this is to work out the final bugs before it is released to the rest of the public. So understand that the beta testing is used for testing and that purpose. So there will be some bugs and get them worked out before it goes full scale soon. You can still sign up now over on the website and use a coupon code EastMeetsWest to save some cash at SpartanForge.ai. And then once the app fully releases again, you'll have a chance to be able to download that and start using it, which hopefully should be here in another week or so, but not exactly sure on that. And then Tethered is a company founded on the principles of educating the hunting community on saddle hunting while creating the most innovative, lightweight, safe products for saddle hunting. And I was using the Tethered system here on this hunt that I'm about to tell you about. So you'll hear a little bit there. Find more at tetherednation.com. And Maven is building the highest quality optics at half the price of their competitors through that direct-to-consumer business model. They're trying to create the best optics for the job, period. Lifetime, no-fault warranty, and an incredible customer experience. I use the B3 8x30 small binoculars for all my whitetail hunts. They're super lightweight and do well even for that small package in low light. You can use the coupon code EastMeetsWest-gift for a free gift with any full price optics order at mavenbuilt.com. GoWild is a free social community built by hunters for hunters with no censorship. So if you want to join me today on GoWild, it's free to enter and you get $10 to spend on gear just for setting up your account. And you'll keep unlocking GoWild rewards. And now you can see my gear setups underneath my profile. It's just under my name, Beau Martonik. And you can join at download time to gowild.com and use the code EastMeetsWest to save 10% off of all the hunting gear that is on their website. So definitely check that out. All right, now let's dive into the story here. Let's get right into it. So I'm going to start from the beginning. Let's go back to 2020. So I found a new area on the map that I really wanted to check out and was trying to, it had everything that I was kind of looking for. And when I'm looking for a new area, I'm really looking at habitat diversity and with a little bit of terrain diversity mixed into that. So this area had everything from newer logging cuts, old logging cuts, had big timber, it had hemlock stands, it had swampy bottoms. I mean, it had everything that you would be looking for that diversity to grow some older age class of deer. And when I started scouting it in the spring of 2020, it was very obvious that this area had exactly what I was looking for. And I'd found some nice sheds, not off the specific buck yet in 2020, but I knew that it had potential. So I started running cameras in there last year, and really it was a big learning lesson for me in there that first year. I ran cameras on a bunch of different elevations, around some different vegetation, some places I thought they might be bedding, on scrapes, on the tops, on the side hills, and the creek bottom. I ran probably 10 to 12 cameras in last year. I went kind of more all in on a new area with cameras than I typically would. Usually I'd run 3 or 4 because I have a lot of cameras. I have just over 30 of them now, but I usually spread them out with different areas, and new areas I don't give a whole lot of attention. But from the sheds I had found and everything in there, I knew this would be an area I might hunt on the first year, and I ended up hunting it quite a bit last year when Justin was here filming and just wasn't completely on top of them. I did not hunt it at all in the early season, just really focused on it in the rut and a little bit in rifle season. But I learned a whole lot about the movement in that area based off of my trail camera knowledge and some of the firsthand experience I had. And what happened was some things had changed, though. There was new logging operations that kind of moved into the area late last year and definitely changed movement and making that more of a primary food source in that location. So in the late season, I started picking up this buck. Well, I had him early on too, but not as often as I did in the late season. And it was this really nice looking 9-point that I had assumed was a 4-year-old. I'm thinking he was a 4-year-old last year. I'm going to send the teeth in to see if he was actually 5 this year. He could be older. He looked older this year, but I was thinking he's a 4-year-old last year, and I had him, on a bunch of my different cameras, but he always seemed to be going to that logging cut in the evening and coming back in the morning. And it looked like I had kind of a general area nailed down to where he would bed on specific winds. And I didn't have it nailed down to a specific bed, but I had a specific area that I thought he was bedding in. And when I say that he was using it consistently, I'm not meaning like every day. I've never had a big whiz deer that I could pattern down to every day. I'm talking about more, I don't know how to even put it, say 3 times in a week and a half span, doing something similar. That's a lot for the environment these deer are living in there. I'm not getting, again, deer on a pattern and I'm like, okay, I see him do this for 3 days in a row, I'm gonna go hunt it the 4th day. That just doesn't happen. But I use that knowledge from that late season stuff to realize, all right, this deer is really preferring this fresh logging cut. And I've learned that they do a lot of the similar stuff in the late season as they do the early season, especially when there's an absence of apples and acorns. When there's not those and there's only really browse and some secondary food sources, it's not, they're going to do a lot of the similar stuff, at least from my experience. So I was in there in the spring and I was looking for this particular buck's sheds, as well as some others, and I found one of them after checking my trail camera and noticing that on January, I think it was the 18th, he had lost one antler. Well, I had him on the day before the 17th going into an area with both antlers on, and then him coming out about, I don't know, quarter mile away on the other side in the next morning in the dark with just one side on, and he was heading a specific direction. So I ended up finding the second one that he lost. I found it sometime in the spring in the direction he was heading. I found that one, but I couldn't find his other side until it was the day before turkey season. I was going in to try to roost some gobblers, and I ended up getting sidetracked as I normally do and was just scouting for deer. And I found his other side. It was a little bit chewed up in this thick hemlock cover. And so that was kind of like, all right, I've got both of his antlers now. and this deer lives in this area. He spends a lot of time there. But the one thing I noticed from studying all my trail cameras, logging all the data in the Google Sheets and the wind direction, the weather, and the dates, and all he's moving, I didn't have many pictures of him during the rut. So I don't know if he leaves the area or my cameras weren't in the right areas there, but I had more information on him early and late, and I kind of figured that to strike on this deer, I was going to have to do it differently than I normally would. I mean, I take my time off, my vacation and everything during the rut, so that's typically when I end up killing my deer, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to think outside the box and try to figure out this deer early on. And what happened was I put all my cameras out in 2021 and added a few and kind of structured it around. And I ran them on scrapes all summer, the same ones I ran them on in the fall. And I started picking up that big 9 again. And I honestly didn't think he got a whole lot bigger from the trail camera pictures, which I was very much underestimating his size once I got up to him. But I started getting him on these scrapes, and last time I checked him was in August, it was middle of September, right when I got back from Colorado. I went in there with my dad and had seen him in there and had a couple pictures of him hard-horned. September the 10th, I think, was the last time I had him at that point. And I was like, all right, he's still in the area. He's still here. So when I took my dad in there, it was the first time I took him into this area. It was just getting his opinion and view on things. And we were going through and just wind mapping the area with milkweed. So I'd go to my potential sets and drop milkweed at specific locations and figure out how the wind was moving through those areas. Well, a specific creek bottom trail that this buck had used a lot in the late season was interesting because it was wide enough that it had if you were in the bottom of that trail, the predominant wind typically worked like in the favor of the deer, like it went in the direction it was supposed to. But I found a tree that was set up right on the creek bank. The creek was directly below me, and it just pulled downhill thermals. I mean, I was there in the afternoon and it was still pulling downward thermal. So I'm like, I think I could set up in this tree no matter what the wind direction is and be kind of covered. So I had that in the back of my mind. And one of the things I noticed from looking at those trail camera pictures from the late season was he liked coming back in the mornings from that logging cut, heading into that bedding area on a southwest wind. The wind would be quartering to him slightly. He likes south and southwest, and the wind would be quartering to him slightly, so giving him that advantage. But, that tree was just golden. So I looked at it, and we had a couple cold nights there right in a row, and there's no cell service directly in that bottom. Not enough to run a cell camera. There was enough in there to send text messages and such, but not have enough for the actual cell camera. So I had a couple cell cameras on the tops of these hills, and I noticed that 2 days before the season, when it was some cold nights, those mornings, I had some buck movement hitting scrapes, and not him, but I had some specific, I had some deer moving, and I was like, all right, the morning going into the first day is going to be cold, about 40 degrees or so. I think I'm going to go in and try to hunt this deer in the morning. My Spartan Forge app had said for that morning that the movement would be transition area, so in between that food and bedding in daylight. So I used that knowledge on that southwest wind to go in there, and that played it played a role in giving me that confidence in that setup for the first day. Well, the access to go in there, the way I needed to get in there was it was 1.7 something miles in to get up in there, just running the creek bottom the whole way. And I went up in early in the morning, climbed my tree, so threw the tethered sticks around the tree, went up and set my platform. It was kind of, man, I was in this birch tree that was up against a bunch of hemlock, so my background was just covered perfectly as far as camo goes. But the branches, it was so tough to climb up. They were like hitting me in the back and these big hemlock branches. I'm trying to move them out of the way as I'm going up, and got into position probably about 45 to 50 minutes before first light even cracked. And then when you're in those thick hemlocks like this bottom was, it was literally 25 minutes after legal shooting light before I could even see well enough to shoot, because it was just so dark in there and so thick of cover. And with the sound of the crick there, I couldn't hear. And then with how thick it was, I couldn't see much. So I just had to be ready. And I thought maybe at first light would be my only chance. I didn't really expect. I figured if he was going to move back to his bedding area, which was pretty close to where I was set up, I'd say I was within about 200 yards of where I thought he would be bedding, maybe even closer. If he was bedding on the one hillside, it might have been only 100 yards, but I was close. And about 8 a.m., a little bit before 8, I see antlers coming through the woods. I mean, like picture perfect. He was kind of off a trail at first, and then he hit the main trail where I wanted him to. And I could see my Exodus camera sitting there on the tree, and he's directly behind it. And in a matter of, from the time I saw him, I saw him about 25 yards away, grabbed my bow off my hanger, had my knees against the tree in the saddle. As soon as he went behind some branches there and his eyes were covered, I drew back and just waited. He walked out, and I stopped him at about 14 yards, and I shot right underneath his armpit. Completely missed him at 14 yards. The easiest shot that I could have ever wanted. I completely blew it. And as soon as I did it, I knew exactly what I did. I went through my steps as far as, Joel Turner talks about your shot process and your release. My release was good, but what I didn't do was I didn't go through the beginning things. The most simple number one thing you learn from the first time you archery hunt from an elevated position is you bend at the waist, not dropping your arm. And I didn't do that. I didn't. There was no other way about it. Simple mistake. I'm embarrassed to say it, but it happened, and I shot right underneath him. So I was using my 25-yard pin, and I held a little bit low, like down at the heart, which was dumb too from that position. I mean, it's only a 2-inch difference from using my 25-yard pin at 15 yards. Like, it's not. I didn't need to do that, and I did, but because of it being so loud by the crick, didn't hear my bow go off. And I mean, that prime nexus I'm using is pretty quiet as it is. And where the arrow hit was kind of a soft bank and some of the pine needles and stuff there. So he didn't know what happened. He just kind of like looks around, started walking away, looking back. So I waited until he got behind some trees. I grabbed another arrow, knocked it, and went to full draw again. He's kind of walking away at this point. I stop him, and he takes another step. I don't have any view of his vitals, so I'm just sitting there while he's looking back. At this point, he's starting to get a little bit like nervous. What is going on? What is this noise? And he starts walking again. I felt like I was at full draw for quite a while. And he goes out and he hits this opening in the gap, and I stop him again. And I see he's quartering away. And I didn't even look at as far as how far the yardage is. I just went off the body size of the deer and my instincts. So I shoot in my yard all the time with just my 25-yard pin, and then my second pin's a 40-yard on my I have a Spot Hog Fast Eddie XL on there. And I practice kind of pin gapping and being able to guesstimate yardage without the rangefinder there. I figured he was, after I shot, I figured he was about 45 yards, but ended up being 53 yards. And I felt so steady, so calm, and kind of in a revenge mode there for how bad I screwed up this easy shot. And I shot, and I heard the shot hit, and it sounded good. I did hear a little bit of a whack, but it didn't sound like just like smack in that front shoulder. It sounded like you hit the pocket, and it went in and maybe hit that opposite shoulder. I'm like, quartering away, that's good. He goes running off, and I don't hear him crash. He went sprinting down the creek in the direction that I walked in, and went with the wind in his face there as he ran away. And I'm like, dang it, I didn't hear him go down. I'm trying to figure out the situation. I'm looking through my binos. I can't find my arrow. I can find my first arrow that I missed, and I'm like, all right. So I waited in the tree for about an hour. Called my dad, and he didn't hunt in the morning, so I was like, you want to come out and help me look here? And I kind of gave him the direction to hike in so that he wouldn't spook it if it was alive, and he would run into it on the way in. So he did a big loop around, came in, and while he was coming in, I climbed down, like I said, about an hour after I shot, and started looking for my arrow, and I can't find it. And but I find blood right away. Good blood. Quite a bit of blood. And he's moving. And my dad comes in, and we start following it, and we're going. I'm like, good, this is looking good. We're going to find him right here. And then we get about 180 yards in, and the blood starts to kind of dry up. And the whole time I did not walk in his tracks. Even after I found the blood, stayed off of it. I'm like, in the back of my mind, I was like, if I ever have to use a blood tracking dog, which up to this point I'd never have before, that I need to stay off this trail. Well, once it started drying up, I was like, I am not risking pushing this deer right now. What I figured I did was, with him quartering away, I thought I hit up too far forward, and that it went through and maybe one lunged him and hit in that opposite, the front of the opposite shoulder, and that was the whack I heard. But there was nothing. So I called like 4 different blood trackers, and ended up getting the one I called originally because I had met this guy before, Nick Getz, and he brought Jake Lister, another guy, and they drove quite a ways to be able to come help me out, which was awesome. But he's like, hey, I don't track anything before 6 hours, especially after he asked me a ton of questions about the shot. I mean, very professional, knows what he's doing, tracks a ton of deer. I'm like, okay. So we got out of there and waited until he came in. We get the dogs on the track, and Jake's dog, right off the bat, he had, it was his first time on a deer, and it was so cool to watch him walk. He followed the blood, and he got in, he got to where we lost blood, and he wasn't used to picking up deer scent yet, but did amazing up to that point. And then, Nick brought his dog Nova over, and she just started picking up the scent of the deer right away. And it crossed kind of this old gravel gated road, and down a little ways, but couldn't pick up a scent on that gravel road, and kept working up and down until found it again. We started working down another couple 100 yards, and just like super confident. And then we got it right on the creek bank, and there was some like sandy areas, and you could see his track in there. I'm like, yeah, it's his track. And we just get up on the other side of the bank, and Nick looks at me, and he's like, your deer's still alive. And I said, how do you know? He's like, she's pulling like crazy. Like, we're close. And right at that point, we look up, and that deer jumps up, bedded out in this goldenrod patch underneath a little group of trees in a high spot, and jumps up, and you could see he's just hurt bad. And we're like, shit, like, damn it, we're gonna have to back out. Like, I don't want to push this deer. You could push him forever. And it's also the legal requirement. If you have a dog, if you see the deer and it's alive, you have to back out. So we backed out. We're like, we're going to have to come in the morning. Just because at that point, again, I thought it was one lung. I didn't know exactly what the shot had been. And so we come in the next morning and bring a team of people because it had rained hard overnight. So figured the scent was going to be washed away, and the dogs probably wouldn't be able to help at that point. We went right to the point where we saw him at, found his bed, and saw the direction he headed. So we went down and just grid searched down the creek bottom. We walked a mile down it, nothing. Came back up the other side, nothing. Like, all right, let's go back to the point where we saw him at, and there's a patch of goldenrods the opposite direction that we saw him run. Let's go through that. And we walked through that, and heard my dad yell, and he walked right up on it. He'd only went 60 yards, but he went in the opposite direction that we saw him run, and he was laying there dead. And what I had found out from that point was my shot had hit. He was quartering away harder than I anticipated, where I thought at the shot. So I'm not sure if he spun a little bit when he heard the sound of the bow go off, because he was more alert at that point, or if he was just quartering that far away. I really don't know. Either way, he was quartering away harder, and it went in back through the guts and then slammed into that opposite front shoulder. So it went through guts, liver, and one lung. And so if we would have known that from the beginning, then we would have went back in there that night, after we had jumped him, went in without the dogs and went in, maybe 4 hours later, and he would have been, I bet he died within an hour of when we saw him that Saturday afternoon. But unfortunately, we had to wait, but that was with the knowledge that we had. That's what we decided to do, and went in and, found him there. And I was, so excited to be able to find this deer. Is a magnificent animal, and to be able to get him on the first day. But it really kind of tainted the experience for me a little bit with the fact that, that the animal did have to suffer there. And so that night that we left him there overnight, it was warm. It never got down below 50 degrees. So once we got there and started cutting them up, it was pretty obvious that the meat was not good. And I tried anything I could, and everyone's like, no, you can't, this deer's not good to be able to consume. So that was really, really hard. Unfortunately, that is what it is. That's what happened. I'm telling everyone this as just being open and honest. I could hide it and say that, everything went just well, but it didn't, and I'm not happy about it. Some stupid mistakes that I had made there from the shot process standpoint that should never have happened. I should have been able to kill him at 14 yards and he should have went 60 yards and died, but that's not what happened. And sometimes that's bow hunting. But I will be doing a better job at practicing more and more from an elevated position. I practice at least 4 to 5 times per week regularly throughout the yard, shooting from different positions and angles and all this stuff, but not much out of the tree. And that's on me, and I will do better at that going forward. Already have started. So I went in there I left my saddle platform and sticks in the tree, and I just went in there yesterday to get it out and went up to where my deer was, and there's literally nothing left of it. There is nothing left of it. Not even bones. Those coyotes, and I'm sure bears, everything. My cell cams in the area were lighting up this whole week with coyotes and bears and everything, and they had eaten every little thing, the birds, everything. So that animal did not go to waste. I'm just very upset about the fact that I wasn't able to get that. But anyways, that it was going back to just the whole process behind finding that deer and going after him. It was a good feeling from the standpoint that I had an opportunity on the first day, and I'd figured that deer for the numbers guys out there, I figured that he would gross score about 140 inches. And the body was so big on him, I actually thought it might have been a little bit less when I was looking at him. But after I had him scored, he ended up gross scoring at 147 inch even, which is incredible. Just wouldn't have expected that for a 9-point. My one last year was 154 and something that I shot with the rifle. So my 2 biggest whitetails in Pennsylvania, 2 years in a row, back to back. I don't know what to say. I'm just incredibly lucky from that standpoint, and I don't know. It just keeps motivating me to continue to work more and now get better, with that process at the moment of the truth and making sure I capitalize there. So hope that the story there had some learning lessons that some people can pull from. It was definitely not a typical setup for the early season, creek bottom, morning hunt, all of that stuff, but that's what the situation told me, and I made a reasonable assumption, figured high risk, high reward. It's early. If I blow them out, it is what it is, and things will settle down. So that's what I did. Ended up working out from that standpoint, and I hope everyone else is had a good opening day there and is working through this warm weather we have. Better days are to come. And I really, really appreciate everyone for listening and giving me, all the positive comments and everything else and messages that I've received based on it. So I hope everyone else again has a great season. I apologize, this Mountain Buck Monday went longer than the typical 15-minute episode, but wanted to give you the full background on this story and give you the hunt breakdown. Well, have a good weekend and good luck.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.